Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. Jeremy Werner and now Joey Wagner joining us to talk about the Illinois side of this. Illinois-Nebraska matchup, 7 p.m. kickoff Friday night at Memorial Stadium in Lincoln. Joey and I always excited to get to Lincoln. It's a great place to go watch a college football game. Before we get to our six-pack, though, Joey, I'm springing this on you. I did not tell you this before. I do want to bring up Grant Smith, Maroa Forsyth kid, committing to Illinois. 3-star prospect, was an Illinois State commit. But Illinois watched him early this season. They kind of had their eye on him for a while. Let's be honest, they needed a tight end. Athletic, big, long, big hands. I heard he had an 80-inch wingspan, 10-inch hands, which are big. Just an interesting prospect. And I think the biggest factor is Illinois really does not want to let a Central Illinois kid go, right? Like if they see a guy that they like from their backyard in Central Illinois, as Brett Bielema said, could be big if you include Matthew Bailey and the Quad Cities and all of that, but they really do their research, and Pat Ryan obviously has a lot to do with that.
Yeah, you look. I think we have to say, I don't know that Illinois was 1,000,000% committed to taking a tight end in this class just for the sake of doing it. I think they would have been comfortable not expanding scholarships if they didn't believe on somebody who could really impact their program down the line. And Grant Smith is a guy 6'5", 220. Comes from Maroa Forsyth, where in that offense, the tight end is really heavily featured. He's going to put up some numbers this year. And I just believe anyone who's coached by Josh Jostis, who comes through the Maroa program, you know what you're getting with a kid from Maroa. So I do like that side of things for Illinois. It's tight ends, right? Like tight ends are development guys outside of the top 2 or 3 in the country annually, right? I mean, roughly in that neighborhood. So, I mean, expect Grant Smith to take a while, but he's a guy who has some of that vertical passing game. His dad had a tryout in the NFL. His dad was a standout basketball and football player at Millikan. Eric Smith, kid who was a late bloomer, but you're right. I don't think Illinois wanted to flirt around with the idea of an Iowa or an Indiana or a Kansas coming in there and taking a kid they liked because they were late to it. You saw that happen with Illinois. Brett Bielema wasn't there with Jack Hockaday, who ended up going from Maroa to Iowa. And Josh Joseph said, hey, Pat Embleton said, we're tired of seeing these Iowa pictures on your wall. Like, I'm going to stand on the table for you guys because I think Pat Embleton probably knows how good of a program Josh Joseph and Maroa Forsyth have.
And Pat Embleton, who has survived 4 head coaches so far.
He's seen these misses live out in real time, Sam Laporta.
I was about to say, they do not want the next Sam Laporta, and it's not to put that pressure on Grant Smith, right? No. But they do not want that next guy to leave. So, when they see a Mac Rosetich that they really like, they're going to go after him, or they see a Matthew Bailey that they like. They're going to go get that guy. So, and that's had a pretty high hit rate so far for Illinois. Obviously, Aiden Lawfrey, Caden Fagan, those are no doubters. But going and really prioritizing a Hank Beatty, who might end up just being a good punt returner for you, but that can help you. And one thing you know, Joe, is when you go to Chicago, and Brett Bielema made this statement today, it's like it's Chicago and the rest of the state of Illinois. There's just not like a ton of loyalty towards Illinois unless you have connections there. It seems like everybody in Central Illinois kind of went to Illinois games or was around Illini fans. Like it was a big deal. Like growing up when I was a kid, Illinois football wasn't a huge deal living about an hour south of Chicago. But for kids like Mike Carpenter, right? Like it was a huge deal. And I just think there's a little bit more likelihood you're going to land those guys and that there's going to be a lot of desire to play for that program. So I think Grant Smith's a decent bet. And now that you're going to have more scholarships too, I think you should be taking more gambles or gamble probably isn't the right word, but you should be taking these guys a little bit more often. So I like it. I think he's an athletic kid. And as you said, Joey, tight ends, man, really hard to really scout. And you've read the whole book on tight ends, but the George Kittles of the world are really late bloomers. That's a position that just feels like development is as important as anything. And Tip Ryman's a great example of that.
Yeah, I think Barry Lunny talked about it with us on the signing day special we did this past season, where he said, usually you get a blocker or a receiver, and very rarely out of high school, you get both. And you've got to kind of find a way to make receivers capable blockers and blockers capable receivers. And that is kind of the book on it, right? There are very few Brock Bowers of the world. And those kids who have both out of high school, who are gifted enough to have both out of high school, they're going to 2% of the colleges in the FBS, right? Like they're staying in that upper echelon, blue blood neighborhood more times than not. So you've got to trust your development to take a guy like Smith and trust that, one, he's got genetics that you can take 220 and make it 285. And he comes from a program that, hey, he knows how to work. He built himself into this. We think we can take him and make him a capable blocker and expand his game down the field. And for the record, I don't want to knock his blocking. This isn't a wide receiver they are projecting. He's physical in high school now, but obviously you've got to ramp that up, Jeremy, when you get to the Big Ten. So I covered Maroa for 4 years. I've known Josh Joestas for a while. I'm going to bet on any kid that comes through that program with, as Josh has mentioned, he's not having those kids all the time, but the ones who are physically in a position to be 6'5", 220, they learn a lot of the other parts of being a Division I player, kind of how to make themselves into a player within that program. And you see that they're in the state championship game more times than not, or annually in the semifinals.
And what I like is last year you got Tanner Hollinger, who's more of like a big physical blocker, in my opinion. And he's got good hands, but like, I think he eventually is more like a Tip Ryman, where the blocking plus a little bit of receiving value. I think Grant Smith's coming more as the dynamic receiver, right? Where you add a little bit of blocking. I think you hope he can be a Cole Rusk type. And we didn't get to see Cole Rusk, but you hope that after Cole is done his time here, that a guy like Grant Smith could be there. Of course, you'd love the guys in 2026 in Central Illinois, J.C. Anderson or Max Suter, to come along as well. But maybe have another local tight end. It can't hurt when you're going after those guys.
I was just going to say, I'm sure Illinois hopes that a year from now we're talking about another Macon County tight end, J.C. Anderson, finding his way to Champaign, or another Central Illinois tight end, Max Suter from Dunlap, finding his way to Champaign. But yeah, I think tight end is a really hard position to evaluate just because of what they're asked to do and the way that bodies just change, right? So you gotta take your bet and trust what you see. And we probably won't know with Grant Smith for 3 years, 2 years, right? That's just how this thing goes with tight ends. But there's a lot there physically that's appealing. And again, as we've mentioned, this wasn't just Illinois reaching and seeing something that no one else has seen. Right? You have programs. When Iowa's kicking the tires on a tight end, that tells me something. When Indiana, when Kansas are kicking the tires on a tight end, that tells me something. So this isn't just you're doing it because he lives 45 minutes away and comes from a good program. You're doing it because you sure as hell hate to see that pop up at one of those other schools on signing day.
You did not want Iowa to offer just to first, right? Like, and just to make Illinois fans feel better about this take. If you believe in him, you go offer him and get the deal done, which is, I think, what they wanted to do here. All right, Joey did the 6-pack of questions this week. I'm excited. I get to sit back and relax. So, Joey, let's start our 6-pack of questions for Illinois football going into a huge first-ranked matchup against Nebraska.
Jeremy, what can a primetime ranked versus ranked, the first one since 2008 for Illinois football, mean for Illinois this season?
I love that we get to focus on this because the coaches won't say much about this
unless they win on Saturday, and then Brett's coming in with bells and he's talking about how big of a deal this was.
This is what you want. A real meaningful game in September on national television, where if you win this game, I heard Ryan Russillo and Todd McShay on the podcast I was listening to on my drive home today talking about, like, I can't wait to see Dylan Raiola against Illinois. And Russillo was mentioning Luke Altmaier. He's like, oh, former Ole Miss guy. And all of a sudden, those kind of guys are going to be talking about you a little bit more. ESPN is going to have Brett Bielema on at some point. And then you can start to build, and it's just a huge opportunity. And whether they win or not, these are the opportunities you really want. I think it's just a great proving ground for this program. It's a great proving ground for Nebraska too, to be like, is this legit? Is this 3-0 start legit? So I think it's really big for them because they got a freshman quarterback that could be the dude there. But I just think for Illinois, it'd be more like 2022 when they went into Wisconsin and just steamrolled them. It was a really eye-opening point for the program. And then you follow it up with more wins against Iowa and Minnesota. I just think this, after the Kansas win, would say this program's legit. Brett Bielema is starting to turn the tide there. And even if there's a step back, as we know, Joey, progress isn't linear. And you have a program that each year can be competitive in the Big Ten. I think we'd be thinking about that. But if they win this one, Joey, all of a sudden it's like, man, if they can get 2 of the next 4, maybe they can really make some noise in the back half of this schedule. And you just got to be in the top 12. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But if you win this game, all of a sudden some doors open up about the possibilities of this season and the possibilities of what you can do long term, because this is a national spotlight game. You're on the biggest game of Friday night, right? So if you win this, people are going to be talking about you on College game day in the morning. People are going to be talking about you heading into Saturday.
This is why you hired Brett Bielema, right? To make these games meaningful. And I know for a lot of people, and this is what I'm struggling with a little bit, but I think I can explain it. This feels like the conversation we had 2 weeks ago before Kansas, doesn't it? That, hey, what a game in September. And this team is like, they're competitive. They're ready for these moments. And Illinois did have a moment. I'm not trying to minimize anything they did against Kansas, because that felt like something. If not for just the people there that night, that felt like something. But when you win and when you get ranked, and we talked about this in 2022, expectations change. And now you're expected to go in there and have a game. Not necessarily expected to win. They're underdogs, right? But there's expectation that this isn't going to be a double-digit game that you're going to just not think twice about for the rest of the weekend. Like, it matters, because if you win because of what you did against Kansas, you can really set yourself up, like you said, to be a frisky Big Ten team.
Yeah, and Joey, like, beating Kansas was like, okay, this team's going to get to a bowl game. You beat Nebraska on the road to get to 4-0, and you're heading into Penn State with nothing to lose, right? And then you get Purdue at home, and you're thinking, man, they could be 5-1 or 6-0. Like, then you're setting yourself up to be like, okay, this might not just be a bowl season. This could be one of the better years in recent Illinois history. And I'm not saying that lightly, but that's the type of win this would be. 2 ranked wins in the first 4 weeks. I know Kansas lost to UNLV, but that changes expectations. You're right.
You're right. And because of those expectations, like, now this becomes the biggest September game.
Yeah.
Right. Like 2 weeks ago, it's like, this is, oh my gosh, would you trade a bowl game for this feeling? Like, that was the conversation around the Kansas game. And because you win that, now you're allowing people to hope a little bit more. Now this game carries so much weight. And of course, being the ranked opponents, like, that matters. And both teams are going to have that. There's going to be buzz going into that. You can just really set yourself up to be like, hey, last year wasn't not really who we are, right? Like, we are closer to what we showed really at the beginning of that 2022 season. And we're on the upswing as a program here. And I don't feel like we're going to wake up on Saturday morning, Jeremy, and it's going to be like 2020 where Graham Mertz as a freshman just ripped through. Like, I'm not saying Dylan Raiola is going to have a bad game, but I just think the expectation has changed where you're not going to get cooked by a freshman quarterback to the tune of, whatever he put up. What was it, 4 or 5 touchdowns in that game? Like, the competitive floor is raised in this. And that conversation after that game was all about Graham Mertz. It was all about Wisconsin. I think Illinois has put itself in a position to have that conversation be about them in some capacity on Saturday morning. And that is a step forward for this program.
Well, nationally, this game is about Nebraska, right? It's about, is this the arrival moment of this proud program? And Matt Rule kind of trying to do what Brett Bielema did 2 years ago, but Illinois can make it about them, right? If they go and win this one, and all of a sudden the story becomes Illinois winning it. And hey, we got to pay attention to what's happening in Champaign. So yeah, it feels like, Kansas felt bigger than Virginia in 2022. Virginia was a huge change, but Kansas was a ranked team. They were so good the year before, but this feels like it could be your Wisconsin moment. Feels like
Wisconsin.
Yeah, it feels like if you do that, all of a sudden you're setting yourself up to where it's like, man, they can start stacking a couple wins and going into October with bowl eligibility already, or not October, November with bowl eligibility already. Man, they got runway to make some noise. All right, number 2.
People are just allowed to hope in September, Jeremy. Like, late September, that's not always been the case around here. Number 2
is the hopeful part of the 6-pack, and then we'll dive into the concerns.
What did Illinois prove to you, Jeremy, in the non-conference portion of the schedule?
That their defense can help them win games. I was really concerned about that, Joey. I thought this defense, the offense was just going to have to outscore people, but I think they can play complementary football, which is why I think the floor of this team is raised tremendously despite some concerns, right? Like, we still got some concerns about the run game on both sides of the ball, but I feel confident in the secondary that they got playmakers, that they aren't going to have breakdowns like they had last year, that the experience is starting to show, and that they have some playmakers in Xavier Scott and Miles Scott and Gabe Akis and Seth Coleman, that those guys that had to take steps forward have taken steps forward. Now there's bigger tests ahead, but for me, it's no doubt like it was mostly about the defense for me. I feel like this defense won't be dominant, but I feel like it will take the ball away more times. I feel like it does give them a chance going into Nebraska, going into Penn State to at least compete and give themselves in the offense a chance to win.
Yeah, the defense has been the story of the first 3 games. The way it's played, the way its coordinator has handled his job. Like Aaron Henry had a lot of doubt about him from outside of that Smith Center coming into the season, and the first 3 games have gone pretty well for him and his defense. So I'm with you. Like I thought, I don't want to lump you in that, but even though I think I know where you stand, like, man, Illinois might have to win some 35, 28 games this season to get out of there, and they're probably still going to have to be in that neighborhood from time to time, right? Like that's just what the Big Ten does.
If you want to beat Oregon, yeah, you're going to have to probably score in the 30s.
Right. But I think you can feel confident that your defense can buckle down and make enough plays that it's not a problem for you going into Big Ten play, and it was a major problem last season. So I obviously echo everything you say there. I don't know that I want to say Luke Altmaier is a dude yet, but something's going on, right? Like something.
I'm close to it. I am too.
Like,
away from it.
Something is brewing with how I feel about Luke Altmaier as a quarterback, because he has made
special feelings, Joey. He's starting to get tingles.
He has made some really big time throws, and he's played really good football this season. Like the biggest throws he's made have been next level throws. They just have, like the way he's putting it out there, the way Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin are playing. This passing attack looks legit, and it looks like a quarterback who's been through some stuff last year, right? Who has grown, who is comfortable, who's figuring out what it takes, really, like the whole picture of what it takes to be a Power 5 starting Power 4 starting quarterback, and everything that comes with that. And Jeremy, you know it, I know it. There's a lot that comes with that. Yeah. There's a ton that with figuring out how you have to be day to day. I think he's doing a really good job, and that's bringing out the talent that he has. And with the run game sputtering, we will get to that. Man, it feels good for Illinois to have a guy who can win you games with his arms. And you're right. I'm probably a Nebraska win for Illinois if they can do it away from being like, hey, this is a dude in the Big Ten, a guy who can win you games at quarterback, we haven't seen that for a while at Illinois, right? I keep saying that, but we haven't. Like, I'm trying to put in perspective how well he's playing right now, and the way he's operating that RPO, I think we're going to see a lot of front end.
Yeah, just to take people behind the curtain, like when you have a game like this, there's a lot more requests for us to go on like radio shows and podcasts and all that. And one of the things I just got done talking about with one of the podcasts I was on was this is a chance for Luke Altmaier to show he's a top tier Big Ten quarterback. Maybe it's not Dylan Gabriel quite level, but I think he can, if he goes and leads Illinois to a victory here, throws for 250 yards, a couple touchdowns, and doesn't turn it over, and Illinois wins, people are gonna be like, hey, that guy is really good. Like he was pretty good last year too. I think he showed last year he's got the talent to do this, right? Like he has the talent to do this. He showed some growth, but he just had growing pains. He talked all season about how more comfortable and how more confident he is. Check mark through 3 games, right? Like he has just looked comfortable, confident. And now, Joey, I think he's got the chance to show he can elevate Illinois, right? Like that is my question all offseason is, can Luke Altmaier in those tough moments of adversity elevate Illinois? I thought he did against Kansas. That wasn't a great start to the game for the offense, but boy, did he make plays at the end of it, winning plays that they had to have. And he did that against Maryland. I thought he did it against Minnesota for the most part last year. So I'm really encouraged by the growth we've seen. And I can't wait to see him go up against what I think is a top tier Big Ten defense against Nebraska and a top talented defense for sure in Penn State, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for Luke Altmaier to gain a lot of buzz here.
Yeah, and I think if Illinois can win this game, Luke Altmaier is going to have a huge hand in that, right? We're about to get into why. Now you can reframe the discussion in Big Ten quarterbacking, right? And you can have that talk Saturday and on Monday after you see what happens around the Big Ten, that Luke Altmaier is in that top 4 or 5 in the conference if he can put this together. But it's a big task. He's going to have to do it, which brings us to our third, Jeremy. How big of a concern is the sputtering run game against this Nebraska defense?
It's weird. It's not as big of a concern because I didn't expect them to run the football well against Nebraska anyway. But it's clearly a concern for the season because while I've been saying it all the time. I mean, we've been talking about it. Like, I think you got to pass to set up the run. I think your strength is the passing game. And what has Barry Loney done at the beginning of second halves when they have to score points and they got to get a jolt going? They go to the passing game. But at some point, you do need to run the football. Like it's still, you have to be able to balance those things out. So you just can't have, the safety sitting back in cover two and being able to take away the deep pass. But you got to be able to find a way to get Caden Fagan involved because I still think he's really good, Joey. They just haven't been able to get him to the second level. It's just with this defensive line for Nebraska, we saw them dominate Illinois last year. 21 rushing yards on 19 carries last year for Illinois. Now, I know that game got away from them pretty quickly, so they kind of had to abandon the run game. But Ty Robinson, number 9, is a stud. Nash Hutmaker, number 0, is a stud. Jamari Butler is good up front. They got a good group of safeties. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to run the football very well against Nebraska. No one has yet. Now, I do think Illinois is the best offense they have played so far. But I think they're going to have to pass more on first down and set up that RPO. The interesting thing here, Joey, is I think Luke Altmaier's got to play a big role in the run game in this game. I think he's got to keep the ball a little bit more and be willing to do it. And for Barry Lundy to be able to call his number, because that's hard to contain. If they're loading up on Caden Fagan, a few of those keeps could be huge first downs.
Yeah, I'm worried about the run game because I think it should have been better against Eastern Illinois. Even though I know Eastern Illinois kind of sold out everything to stop that inside zone, it should have been better. The Illinois coaches, their history, kind of the way that they've talked, they've set the expectation that this team should be able to run the ball better, right? The way they talk about what their offensive line needs to do, the way they talk about their running backs, the expectation is high. Also, given who your head coach is, given who your offensive coordinator is, like, we're not trying to set these unrealistic expectations. This isn't an air raid offense that we're saying, boy, they're not running it well enough. This is a team that not stubbornly wants to run the ball, but they want to be able to run the ball. And that should put them in that top half of the Big Ten, if not higher conversation. We just haven't seen that play out. The interior of the offensive line, the 3 spots with the most continuity, Jeremy, coming in, no spoilers, man, coming into this season has not really played as well as we thought that they would play. That's got to improve. And then you factor in this Nebraska defensive front. That's concerning. It just is in terms of the running backs finding space. Nebraska is allowing 70 yards rushing. We do have to admit, and we have to bring up, UTEP, Colorado, they rank 116 and worse in the FBS. Colorado's 129 in rushing yards gained. So you're not running. I mean, these aren't high-powered rushing attacks in northern Iowa. Obviously,
Nebraska was good last year at this, right? And they
were. But like, you've got to try to figure out a way to get that going, whether that's rotations, whether that's different formations, whatever it takes to get that going. And to your point, Jeremy, I think Luke Altmaier is going to have a hand in this. I think we saw, for at least this season, we kind of saw the development of that last week, right? With those RPOs where Altmaier can hand it off. He can find Zachary Franklin, Pat Bryant. Or I thought one of his better plays of the game was to keep it and run and find some of that space. He's operating that RPO at a high level right now. He's clearly understanding all the pieces that go into that RPO. And that gives him 3 different options to build off of. And I think you're going to need to tap into those against the Nebraska defense that's really strong against the run.
Yeah. And like, if that D end has to worry about Luke Altmaier, that opens up running lanes. Right. Like, and that just opens up the passing game, right? It can bring the safety up and all of a sudden it's an easy bang, bang, 14 yards. This is Zachary Franklin. So I think that RPO game is working for them. It's not all you run, of course, but I do think it should play a huge role here because I think it's just really hard to defend when you got a good decision maker at quarterback and weapons like you do at wide receiver.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Jeremy. Number 4, Illinois must do blank to leave Nebraska with a win.
I keep saying if they have to make Dylan Raiola look like a freshman. He's really good. He's really talented. He's got an NFL cannon for an arm. He's got moxie. He's got some swagger to him that some people don't like. But his team obviously believes in him. And he's a huge upgrade over what Nebraska's had at quarterback, really since Adrian Martinez. And they didn't get the most out of Adrian Martinez because their coaching staff wasn't very good, Joey. Don't know if you know that. But yes,
every piece of content that I proof of yours this week, like, all right, where's he going to do it? Where's he going to do it? And there it is. It's like little nuggets that anyone who knows Werner can feel this animosity towards Scott Frost. And you've gotten a little bit better in your age now, Jeremy, of kind of hiding it. So you have to know.
Game. How do you not make a bowl game at Nebraska when you're Scott freaking Frost? You're like the
Golden King.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe how bad it was. He didn't care about the trenches. Matt Rule does. He's surrounded them with a good offensive line. They got good receivers, some talented running backs. They've gone and gotten some good guys in the portal, but you kind of got to let Dylan Raiola decide this game if you're Illinois, right? You don't want him just run 200 yards, which I would be concerned about. Now, that could be a losing strategy because Dylan Raiola is really, really talented. But Illinois is the best defense he has faced. You got a veteran secondary that I think can confuse him. I want to dive into the analytics. I got to find these analytics, but it feels like they are running way more zone. Right? And they're showing some man things and dropping into zones. I think the communication has been phenomenal on the back end. I think that goes along with experience of Miles Scott, Xavier Scott, now Matthew Bailey returning. Those safeties have done a really, really good job. I think your corners have been solid. I think they're going to be tested more than they have all year. So I'm interested to see how Caleb Patterson and Torrey Cox Jr. do against that. If we see more Tyler Strain, if we see more Terrence Brooks, but you got to get pressure on this guy because he gets rid of the ball quickly, Joey. But that means the secondary has to be able to press in coverage. And then when they do have time to get after him, Seth Coleman, Gabe Akis, T-Rod Edwards, Dennis Briggs, they got to get after him. So put some pressure on him because he hasn't faced it yet this year. He hasn't faced a lot of adverse moments. Let's see if he makes a mistake, how he bounces back from it against a top 25 team.
I'm going to save some of my Dylan Raiola discussion. I did some research for Jeremy. Can you believe it? Been kind of locked away here at home. Did a little research this week. It's new for me. Luke Altmaier's got to be a dude.
Yeah,
he does. And because I don't think the running game is going to be able to take hold, because I fear that Dylan Raiola can win this game with his arm, because Nebraska can run the ball well, I think Illinois is going to have to score points. And to me, the best route for that is Luke Altmaier taking this stage, this national primetime ranked first ranked stage, and really kind of stamping his name as in that conversation in the Big Ten. And I know this is a tall order. Nebraska's got a good secondary. Their defense is really good. The Huskers play strong defensively. They're smart. They're physical. I think if Illinois wants to get out of there, Luke Altmaier's got to have to make some big-time throws. And we're looking at a Zachary Franklin, a Pat Bryant. Does Malik Elzy kind of factor into that conversation this week? It's a game that you're probably going to have to throw. Similar to how I felt about Kansas going into it, which didn't play out that way. But I think he's going to have to make some of those big-time throws again in big moments.
Yeah, and obviously the key is takeaways. Like, I mean, that's key of any game. They're going to have to turn him over. But I do think when they get into scoring zone, like they need to score touchdowns, right? Like it's great that you got 2 field goal kickers, and if you get into the 40, you feel like you have a chance to get 3 points, which is awesome for Illinois and could play a huge role in a lot of these close games coming up. But Illinois is 12 for 12 in the red zone, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. They need to score touchdowns. Like, would they have 3 field goals against Kansas? Like, if you would have scored a touchdown, you would have felt a heck of a lot better instead of one of those field goals. So I think that could be big as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. What can Illinois do to slow down Dylan Raiola? Can I go into my stats real quick?
Yeah, I'll let you take this one since I just talked about Dylan Raiola.
Dylan Raiola, I mean, number one, obviously all the talent in the world, right? He's got a huge arm, but he has not really been sped up this year. He's gotten the ball out in 2.53 seconds, which is roughly, I mean, PFF didn't let you go straight up by starters in the Power 4, but roughly 13th is top 15 in terms of speed in the Power 4. You've got to try to confuse him, make that first read get a little shaky for him, right? Not trust exactly what he sees. You've got to work with your experienced secondary to try to just get him uncomfortable, to make him think a little bit and let your pass rush get home. And if you can do that, I would feel better about that, because you saw the way Seth Coleman, you saw Gabe Akis, T-Rod Edwards, Dennis Briggs, the way that they pressured last week, which I think is probably traditionally more what Aaron Henry wants to do. I think, again, he kind of freaked out over Jalen Daniels and his running ability that worked this year, right, in terms of not sending a bunch up there. But Raiola's gotten the ball out quickly. They have run a scheme for him where it's just boom, 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 Your decisions are right there. He's a smart kid. He's a talented kid. So just for reference, Jalen Daniels, his time 2.80. I know that doesn't sound like a huge difference, but that is a very big difference in terms of getting the ball out. Joe Labus, 2.72. He was 2.76 against Illinois. Daniels was 2.77 against Illinois. You just got to make Raiola hold on to that and see if you can trust your pass rush. The guys on the edges that you think that we thought coming into the season had that ability to change games, and give them an opportunity with the quarterback to have the ball in his hands to change those games.
And you would think the way to slow that down is not to sit in the soft zone, right? Is to press these guys a little bit more or confuse them, right, with your coverage. Where you drop back, is like he thought it was man-to-man, then, oh, man, I got to adjust. Is this 2? Is it 3? That kind of stuff you have to be able to do, because if you just let him know right before the snap, this is going to be cover 3 or cover 2, like, he can pick you apart. He knows where he's going to go before the snap, which is what I do like about the defense Brett Bielema and Aaron Henry and Ryan Walters have had, is they disguise a lot of those things. And Matt Bailey could be a big part of that, right?
Yeah, and you've also got to, if he's holding on to it, close up that short part of the field. He is 43 of his passes have come 9 yards or closer. He's only thrown 3 incompletions there. Like, he is really effective. Those short passes, letting those wide receivers, they've really boosted their wide receiver room this year, letting them get out in space, make defenders tackle them in space. And 31 passes have come on 10 yards or deeper, and he's 18 of 31 on those. Obviously, he's got a huge arm, right? So you're not encouraging him to try to throw it over the head of Miles Scott, but you've got to kind of close up those quick hitters close to the line of scrimmage and make him sit back there and process what you're doing defensively. All that said, I think he's going to be like, you probably don't have very many drives, right? Like, he's going to catch on quickly. It's a good coaching staff. He's a good quarterback, but you've got to try to rattle him and let your pressure get home.
Yeah, just to give you a few more names, he'll be thrown to Isaiah Nair, Texas transfer. I think Illinois was in on him a little bit. He was at Wyoming in 2021 before he tore his ACL, but that year he had 44 receptions for 878 yards. He's been their go-to guy, number 18. Jamal Banks, another big physical, 6'4", 220, Wake Forest transfer. During the last 2 years, he had 101 receptions for about 1,300 yards and 13 touchdowns. He's number 4. And Ja'Cory Barney, I feel like Illinois recruited this kid out of Miami. 6'1" or 6 foot, about 165, 170 pounds. Burner. They get him the ball in a lot of creative ways. They're really excited about what he could be. So you're right, Joey. They have upgraded that wide receiver position too.
They have. So this is the biggest test, I think, for the Illinois secondary. Kansas was pretty good. The corners, you're right, absolutely. Which makes me wonder, how does that secondary shake out, right? Like, I think we saw last week that it's still evolving. The first 2 games, it's like, okay, these are the 2 guys they trust. They trust Caleb Patterson. They trust Torrey Cox. Tyler Strain gets healthy. Terrence Brooks starts stacking some better days of practice. And it's like, this isn't just going to be like this for the rest of the year because they're set in stone that these are the 2 guys and there's no movement there. So how does that continue to evolve this week at Nebraska? And I don't know, right? Like, I don't know if we're going to see more Tyler Strain with Xavier Scott outside, or if you're going to see more Terrence Brooks out there, but you're starting to see options, Jeremy, develop back there. I like how Aaron Henry says, like, hey, we didn't have those options last year. Yeah, kind of by your own design, right? Yeah. Like, you guys didn't go finding a Terrence Brooks and Torrey Cox in the transfer portal, but they did this year, and now you're starting to see some of that build up. And I've said it before, the Terrence Brooks conversation has kind of quieted down as his wins have happened and the defense has played better. He is still their most talented defensive back. I still expect him to play significant snaps this season. Seeing him last week in meaningful snaps made me think, like, it's closer. It's on its way with him to get more opportunity in that secondary. And I think when they can trust him to do that, that talent is going to shine through.
What was it? 3 series, I think he played in that game.
Yeah, I think that's right. And they weren't meaningless, right? I mean, Illinois was never really threatened against Central Michigan, but you certainly weren't at a point you're just throwing in your backups for the sake of it either.
Yeah, 25 snaps. So that was significant because Caleb Patterson had 38, right? So I do think you're starting to see he earned some playing time. Did he earn more of it? That'll be interesting to move forward. All right, picks to click, offense and defense. I'll let you go offense first, Joey.
Back by popular demand, me, really, Jeremy.
I forgot about this the first couple of weeks. Gotta be honest.
I did too. You kind of laid the framework for it last week with Miles Scott, and it just went over my head. I mean, do we have rules like last year? We couldn't say Johnny Newton. We couldn't say Isaiah Williams. Do we need to establish rules?
First game, you can go with it. I mean, I do think there's a curve. Like Luke Altmaier has a higher bar to get it than, say, a running back or receiver.
Sure, that's fair. I feel like I've talked a lot about Luke Altmaier at this point. I don't want to rehash everything I've said about him, so I'm going to stick with my Pat Bryant to the end zone parade that I've been throwing for a few weeks now. He just kind of feels like for him too, right? Like for Luke Altmaier to show on a national stage that he's taken that step. This is a good opportunity for Pat Bryant to show people that, like, hey, I know Isaiah Williams, I know Casey Washington, but I'm still pretty good too. And he's really taken a step. Luke Altmaier trusts him. He trusts him in big moments. I think that's critical too, Jeremy. I think Pat Bryant is my guy. What's that? 6 catches for 80 or more yards and a touchdown. Is that about right?
Get touchdowns. He'll be in that conversation.
Right.
I would love to just go off this isn't off the beaten path, but just kind of go against the conversation we're having and be like, this is the Caden Fagan game because reasons. Like all of a sudden they run the ball well and Caden Fagan.
What's your level of shock if that's what we're talking about post game? I mean, I'm fairly surprised, but also that kind of feels like a very Illinois thing right now.
Yeah, I'd like to get him some touches in the passing game because I think he could do some damage there. I'm going with Sakari Franklin. He's gotten targeted so much. You talk about Luke Altmaier trusting a guy. He's gone to him a lot. He had 5 targets the first 2 games, 18 the last 2 games. I mean, he's had 16 receptions or 14 receptions the last 2 games. Kind of goes under the radar because how well Pat Bryant has played. But Sakari is just going to get a ton of targets. I think he gets about 10 targets in this game, and I think he's going to be really important because if they do have to pass the ball, he's going to be a big part of just being able to move the ball. Is he able to, Tommy Hill is a really good defensive back, but he can only guard one of these guys, right? So it'll be fun to watch, but I don't think we can go wrong with a wide receiver, given that we think these guys are going to have to throw the ball. I'd love to go off on a limb and go with Caden Fagan just because it's the last thing you'd expect for Illinois to run the ball well, but I'm just going to go with Sakari Franklin because all the targets he's going to get.
Yeah, I think we got to stick with what we know, right? And right now, if it's not Luke Altmaier, it's one of those two. Actually, until we really see the running game going, like I feel like that's going to be a theme when we talk next week, right? Those are the 3 biggest playmakers right now for the Illinois offense. Defensively, I feel like I know maybe where you're thinking, so I'm gonna go with Matthew Bailey. It's been a little quieter, Jeremy, since that Kansas game where I thought he really, really played well. You kind of quieted, or maybe it's Eastern Illinois. That's what it was. It's kind of.
I mean, he's leading the team in tackles.
He is, but like you haven't seen those game-changing plays from him at this point, and he looks like a guy who's still working his way into more meaningful college snaps while he's still being effective. Like I'm not trying to paint the picture of someone who's ineffective.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah.
The 3 safeties are so important to this defense, and I include the nickel in that, right? And Xavier Scott. I think him just doing his job well and being reliable in his responsibilities has really allowed Miles Scott and Xavier Scott to do what they're doing. So I know he's not the one getting the interceptions and getting this, but he does come up and make stops when last year the strong safety was struggling to make some of those tackles. And he's just reliable in what he's supposed to do. So I think that gives Miles Scott more freedom to do what he's doing. So I think he's been a part of what they're doing in that secondary, right? So maybe he's not the one making plays, but because of what he's doing, I think that the defense as a whole and the secondary as a whole is succeeding.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think when we talk in the lens of trying to disguise your coverage for Dylan Raiola, he is really at the heart of that. We haven't seen a lot of the pre-snap movement since that first game, since I really hung on to that angle, like probably too much, too early. We haven't seen a lot of that movement, but maybe that comes back when you're trying to get a freshman quarterback just out of his comfort zone. Maybe you look to Matthew Bailey to show this and really mean that. Like this feels like a game where you could see that happen a little bit more within the Illinois defense.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at how much Nebraska runs 11 personnel, but I would imagine they do a lot. So I would think that, they're going to have 5 defensive backs out there and not 2 linebackers like they had for a lot of the game.
Bielema kind of alluded to that, Jeremy, on Monday when someone asked him about, I don't remember, maybe the secondary. He said, hey, things are going to change in a hurry. Effectively, like, we're going to play more defensive backs out there because what we're seeing coming up is going to lend for that. And I think Nebraska could fall into that category.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to go on Miles Scott or Xavier Scott here because they could get a pick. But I'm going to go with somebody on the defensive front because I want to see this team stop the run. And I'm going to go with Dennis Briggs Jr., who I think quietly has had a couple good games here. And the fact that, I think he's pretty stout defending the run, but he's also getting some pressure. He and T.Rod Edwards both are. I've been really impressed, really, with the defensive front the last couple games. Not just rushing the passer, but I just thought they did a great job in what their responsibility was against Kansas of containing, Jalen Daniels, because you want to get after the quarterback, but they did a good job of just kind of containing him. So they got to stop the run game, and Nebraska's had a good run game so far this season, and they just have to be competitive and maybe bend but not break. Would be the word that they use for that. But they got a big physical running back in Dante Dowdle. He's a 4-star Oregon transfer, 31 carries, 184 yards, 6'2", 225. So these guys are going to have to hold their own in the ground game. And then once they force third down, these guys are going to have to make some plays. And with the attention that Gabe Backus and Seth Coleman get, you got to get some interior pressure. And I think T-Rod and Dennis Briggs, I think that's what their strength is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, can that secondary hold coverage long enough to make Raiola hold on to that ball to allow that pressure to get home? And then you've got to account Jeremy still for Raiola's not an oak tree, right? Like quote former friend Rod Smith. He can move, man, and he can, like, there's going to be a third down where he runs out of there, and that's going to feel like a big third down to pick up a first down because he can do that. Like you got to account for that. I don't think you've got a full DeQuan Finn, full Jalen Daniels prep for, but you've got to be aware that this guy can get out there and like he can get one of those back-breaking first downs that you just feel like you had him, and all of a sudden
it's that Pat Mahomes comp.
Yes,
it's like he doesn't scare you like as a runner, but like then all of a sudden he's just prolonging a play and makes a play, right? It's like that guy's not that fast. He's not, but he's able to do it. Like he's able to get out there on the move.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm really excited to see him. Right, like I know maybe some people from the Illinois fans might be tired of constantly hearing about him because he justifiably has gotten a lot of conversation this week. We've asked all the coaches and players about him. He's a 5-star, man. He's good. He is a good quarterback, and I'm excited to see what that looks like. It's really his biggest test defensively, no doubt, against this Illinois defense.
Yeah, and again, I just think Illinois got to take advantage of getting him early in the season because I think he's going to get better and better. I do think he's going to have some growing pains at some point in the Big Ten, but he's really talented. But now is a big test for him. That's why I love this game, man. Like this is what you want is you want to see how good you are. And for Illinois, it's a chance to show that their defense is way better than it was last year. And for their offense is way better than it was against Nebraska at this time last year. Because after that Nebraska game, it wasn't great for Barry Lundy Jr. at the time. And then all of a sudden you go to Maryland, you find a way to win. The offense really turned the corner. So this is a great chance for Illinois to prove itself. And I think same way for Nebraska. It's a great chance for them to prove themselves against their biggest task so far.
Yeah, both these teams can leave Friday night as kind of that frisky Big Ten team. Because you got your Ohio States, Penn State, Oregon. Hard to get a read on Michigan right now with their quarterback. USC, someone's got to be in that kind of chaos mode. Could they really mess around? And
who is Iowa? Yeah, who is Iowa?
Yes, could they Wisconsin or Iowa their way into that next tier that really ticks someone off, ticks one of those top dogs off?
Like when that college football playoff, that first ranking comes out, who's like number 16, 17, and you're like, really? They have a path? Yeah.
One of these two teams feels like that wave in the Big Ten. Obviously, Iowa as well as in that conversation. But this is a fun one, man, because it's two good coaching staffs. I think we can very clearly say that, and coaching staffs that have improved the programs they've taken over in relatively short order, definitely with Matt Rule and Brett Bielema's getting this program back to what we saw in parts in 2022.
I think these are two coaches and I think two programs now that have the respect of football people, right? Like, we joke about me with Scott Frost. I just didn't understand what they were trying to do. Like, it was just like, it doesn't make sense. Matt Rule gets it. Brett Bielema gets it. Like, they know what it takes to build a program and to win. Now it's about just getting the right guys, developing it, and doing it. So that's why this is a lot of fun because it's two programs kind of fighting for the same kind of respect.
Yeah, and two programs that if it ultimately doesn't work, you're going to go back and be like, well, I like the process, right? Like everything was sound, and then you have to figure out why it didn't work. But like both of these guys have a really good build this thing up process. Their decisions are sound. Just got to do it on the field. This is a huge one for those guys to prove that on Friday.
Should we give a pick on here?
No.
We'll save that for our preview and picks.
Yeah, let's do that.
I will say 8.5, 9. 8.5, 9.5 felt a little bit. I would thought it would have been more like 7. Maybe I'm picking nits there.
I mean, I feel like if it goes that way, right? Like something's happened late, because I feel like this is going to be, you're going to go in the third quarter or the fourth quarter. It's going to be a 3-point game, a 7-point game. And then we'll see what happens late. But I don't think, I'm just having a hard time seeing either one of these teams being up 14 points at any given time in this game.
All right. That'll do it for us. Joey Wagner, thank you, buddy.
Thanks, man. See you in Omaha.
Yeah, it's going to be the start of many long drives for us. I just saw the equipment truck today. I'm like, man, those guys got to drive a long way to go to Eugene, Oregon in a month.
Yeah. Hey, we got a lot of car hours here.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Playlist?
I was going to ask you the same. I'm sure you're going to have the new Linkin Park on.
I was going to say there's new Linkin Park. There's only one song though. It's just going to play over and over again because it's really good.
Piper and I drive in total silence, so that's a welcome change for what we do.
I'll probably start off with pop punk. You always feel good going back to our pop punk. But
I'll have any number of complaints. I just start unleashing about the time we get halfway there. That I'm going to get pretty fired up. Probably going to curse a little bit, Jeremy. That'll get us through at least 3 hours of the drive.
Throw a podcast on there at some point, maybe listen to Tom Fernelli and the guys at Cover 3, because that's the thing. People are like talking nationally about this game, so it's fun to be able to hear from some of those guys, especially Tom and the crew do a great job with that. I got to go get some snacks though. I'm going to get some jerky. Anything you need me to pick up?
Candy, man. Get candy. Don't ask Lante. What kind of candy?
I was going to say you guys equally love candy, just different types of candy.
Yeah, one of us likes good candy. The other's Lon.
He's a big dud guy, milk duds, from what I understand.
Yeah, checks. Terrible, absolutely terrible. If you get milk duds, I'm gonna throw them out the window, mile by mile. You're not like the box I won't litter, but like chewy sweet tarts, Sour Patch watermelons, anything Reese's really is gonna do wonders. That problem with Reese's, and you get really thirsty because you're drinking chocolate or eating chocolate, and you're going to the bathroom more than I already do. Not a good road trip counterpart, Jeremy.
We do have to stop a lot with Mr. Joseph here.
We do. I-80 truck stop, man. Get Wendy's, and you can get a Mountain Dew Baja Blast all at one. What a time.
That'll last you all the way to Omaha. Long drive, but we will make it there to Omaha and then Lincoln on Friday night. I'll just be the guy with beef jerky and protein bars, Joey.
Beef jerky, I mean beef jerky. Protein bars you can keep. I know you like doing the Powerade. That's a good.
Oh, Powerade's fantastic. Powerade Zero, purple. Oh man.
It was always nice in that stretch in March. I'd get in the back seat and I'd see, I'm like, maybe these are for the kids, but I doubt it because I don't think they've been in this car for like 3 weeks. It's just me and Piper.
My wife backed us up some snacks and some drinks. I love her.
And a phone charger. Really just A+ stuff from the Werner household.
I do not deserve her. All right, Joey, thank you. Thank you to everybody for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. I won't wave to you, YouTube, because I get in trouble when I do that. Let's give you a thumbs up. Thank you, YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.